There's a certain way a man moves when he's tired of wasting his words, tired of watching his openness get translated into permission, tired of confusing honesty with exposure, tired of believing that being good is the same thing as being safe. Because eventually life teaches you what philosophy tried to tell you early. That character without strategy becomes a donation, and the world is full of hands reaching for free access. In the old Stoic sense, virtue was never naive, it was never soft, it was never blind. It was composure under pressure and clarity under temptation. It was the ability to choose the right act without needing applause for it. And that's why the calmest men often look the most dangerous to people who live through impulses. Because when a man can govern himself, he stops being an easy target for anyone else's agenda. And that shift is visible even when he says nothing. There's a reason Robert Greene's work lands the way it does for certain minds. Because books like The 48 Laws of Power and The Art of Seduction don't flatter you with comfort, they show you the architecture that was already operating around you. The unspoken rules that people swear don't exist while they benefit from them every day. And once you see the architecture, you stop reacting to outcomes and start noticing leverage, timing, distance, the price of access, and the quiet truth that most people judge you less by what you are and more by what you appear to be when they first meet you. Which is why the naive man confesses and hopes to be understood, while the disciplined man reveals with intention and lets the world earn the rest. This is the unnamed way, and it doesn't begin with tactics, it begins with posture. Because seduction, real seduction, not the cartoon version, has always been less about what you say and more about what you transmit. And what you transmit is always your inner state. Whether your nervous system is calm or hungry, whether you're grounded or seeking, whether you're complete or bargaining, because the moment you step into an interaction needing an outcome, you turn yourself into a negotiator begging for terms, and the moment you step into an interaction willing to observe without chasing, you become the man who sets the pace, and pace is power. Most people never notice that the nice version of them is often just the fearful version cleaned up for social approval. Because niceness can be a mask that avoids conflict, avoids tension, avoids truth, avoids the risk of being disliked. And when a man lives like that long enough, he starts to confuse peace with permission, he starts to confuse loyalty with endurance, he starts to confuse patience with paralysis. And then he wonders why people interrupt him, take from him, forget him, drift from him, because the world rarely respects what it can access without cost. That's the separation. And it doesn't require insults to explain it, because you can see it everywhere if you look. You can see the reactors who enter a room and immediately mirror the emotional temperature like they're trying to blend into the wallpaper. And you can see the ones who don't mirror anything, who arrive with their own internal weather, quiet and stable, and somehow everyone else starts adjusting to them without being told, because the man who cannot be moved becomes a reference point, and the man who is always moving emotionally becomes background noise. Greene wrote about it in different language, and Machiavelli understood it centuries before, because both were pointing at the same human mechanism. People respond to signals, not speeches. They respond to atmosphere, not morality. They respond to what feels inevitable, and inevitability is created by restraint, by timing, by selective disclosure, by the ability to let a silence sit in the air without rushing to save it. Because the man who rushes is the man who is afraid of losing control of the moment. And fear leaks, even when your words are polished. A lot of men try to learn seduction the same way they try to learn everything else. By collecting information like it's armor, by memorizing frameworks, by hoping a script will protect them from uncertainty. But the hard part is that seduction is not a script. It's a nervous system. And if your nervous system is begging for certainty, your mouth will betray you no matter how perfect the line sounds. Because your timing will be wrong, your eye contact will be hungry, your laughter will be approval-seeking, your generosity will feel like a bribe, and people will feel the transaction underneath the kindness. That's where the mirror shows up, because the same pattern repeats in every high-stakes environment, whether it's relationships, business, social hierarchy, or trading. Because trading is just another place where the human need to control outcomes gets punished. And a man who cannot sit with uncertainty will chase what moves. He'll enter early, adjust late, overmanage, overexplain, overtrade, overtext, overgive, and then tell himself the problem is the environment, the market, the other person, the timing, the wrong strategy. When the real problem is still the same, the internal need to force certainty so you don't have to feel the discomfort of waiting. A calmer man doesn't need to be told to be mysterious, because mystery isn't an act. It's a side effect of not leaking, and not leaking is a discipline that touches everything. The way you speak, the way you react, the way you reveal plans, the way you handle disrespect, the way you handle praise, the way you handle silence. Because when you explain yourself too quickly, you hand people a map to your emotional structure, and once they have the map, consciously or unconsciously, they can push buttons, pull strings, predict reactions, and steer you, which is why Machiavellianism, in its cleanest form, is less about deception and more about refusing to be easily read. Because what's easily read is easily controlled. Green's power laws, when you strip away the sensational framing, are mostly warnings about how humans actually behave under the surface, how they reward confidence and punish neediness, how they admire strength while publicly condemning it, how they claim to want honesty while using truth as ammunition when it benefits them, how they say they want you to open up and then lose respect when you bleed without boundaries, because people say one thing and respond to another, and a disciplined man notices the response, not the story. So the hunter archetype steps in here, not as a costume, not as bravado, not as noise, but as a quieter operating system where you stop trying to win people with effort and start making your presence a scarce resource, because scarcity creates attention, and attention creates weight, and weight creates influence. And influence is what most men are actually craving when they say they want confidence or charisma or game, because what they want is to stop being ignored. A hunter doesn't enter the forest announcing his hunger. He doesn't chase every movement in the trees. He doesn't reveal his position to prove he exists. He watches long enough to know what matters. He moves when conditions align, and he doesn't apologize for restraint. And that same posture, when translated into the human world, becomes a kind of gravity that people feel before they understand. Because most people are starving for one thing they almost never receive: real attention that isn't self-serving. When you become outer-directed, not in a needy, tell me about yourself so you like me way, but in a calm, I'm here, I'm present, I'm reading you without trying to take from you way, something changes in the room, because people are used to being spoken at, used to being sold to, used to being managed, used to being treated like a means. And when your attention has no desperation attached to it, when it's clean and quiet, it becomes disarming, because it doesn't feel like a request, it feels like a decision. And this is where the deeper psychology of seduction lives, in the ability to make the other person feel seen without making yourself small, in the ability to be warm without becoming available, in the ability to be kind without becoming predictable. Because predictability is where people get careless with you, and carelessness is where disrespect grows. The distinction that matters here is vulnerability versus insecurity, because vulnerability is open strength. It's the capacity to be human without bargaining for protection, while insecurity is a leak that begs to be sealed by someone else's reassurance, and people can sense the difference even when they can't name it, because insecurity has a smell. It's the overtext, the rushed explanation, the immediate compliance, the constant checking for reactions, the inability to let a message sit unanswered, the inability to let a silence exist, the inability to walk away without a speech. Stoicism doesn't teach you to become cold, it teaches you to become governed. And governance is seductive because it creates safety, and safety isn't boring when it's paired with depth. Because what people truly crave isn't chaos. It's relief from chaos, but they also crave aliveness. They crave a sense that something is happening here that isn't ordinary. And this is why the theater Green talks about matters. Not in a fake way, but in an intentional way, because the banal kills attention, and attention is the doorway to influence. So a man who understands this doesn't try to impress with money or grand gestures or performance. He impresses with thought, with intentionality, with the quiet sign that he was paying attention to who someone is beneath their words. And when you do that, without clinging, without forcing, you're doing what the best seducers have always done, which is making the other person feel like they matter. Not because you need them, but because you chose to see them. And that choice, made from strength, is rare. Now discipline becomes identity, because none of this works if it's a weekend persona. And Green's mastery points toward the same thing the Stoics pointed toward, that what looks like natural talent is often just someone who stayed long enough with boredom to become lethal at the basics. And seduction has basics too, not gimmicks. Basics like pacing, listening, controlled disclosure, delayed gratification, standards, boundaries, the ability to create a frame and hold it, the ability to be calm while someone else escalates, the ability to stay composed while someone tests you, because tests are constant and most men fail them by overreacting. That's why Machiavellian awareness matters, not as paranoia, but as clarity, because once you accept that people are driven by incentives, by fear, by desire, by pride, by scarcity, you stop taking everything personally and you start seeing patterns. And pattern recognition is power, because it keeps you from begging in places where begging is punished, and it keeps you from overinvesting where overinvestment becomes a leash. And then the final phase is silent belonging, not the loud kind where you announce a label, but the quiet recognition that the man you're becoming is not built for the old way of moving anymore. The way where you confess to be understood, the way where you explain to be accepted, the way where you chase to be chosen, the way where you try to be universally liked and end up universally ignored. Because once you understand these dynamics, it becomes hard to pretend you don't. It becomes hard to go back to leaking, hard to go back to overgiving, hard to go back to being easy to read, because you start seeing the cost of exposure in real time. If this hit in the way it's supposed to hit, not as entertainment, but as recognition, comment, hunter. And hit like if you felt the shift from trying to be liked to becoming hard to replace, because that shift changes everything without you needing to say much about it. And if you stay around for more of this, you'll notice something quietly happening over time, where you speak less, move slower, choose faster, and you don't announce changes until they're already done. Because that's what strategy looks like when it's fused into identity. And once you see that, you don't unsee it, and some paths close behind you without drama, and you don't chase them, because you've learned that the man who controls himself controls the room, and the man who controls the room rarely needs to explain why.